I remember sitting in the grad club in Kingston, Ontario, listening to Anne-Marie Turza give a reading of poems from her first collection, The Quiet. And I remember thinking, this is kind of boring. But back then, I was an ignoramus, living my life as a shadow oblivious to subtle shades of poetic beauty. Years later, somehow, I owned a copy of The Quiet. It sat on my bookshelf, and every so often I'd pick it up, glance through, then put it back and stare at the spine, puzzled, suspicious. What were these words doing? Well, in November of last year, I finally sat down with the book and gave it the attention it deserved. At first, I dismissed the structure on the cover as an awkward windmill, but then I did some actual research. I flipped the book over and discovered this was the work of Minoru Nomada, who was obsessed with imaginary and uninhabited architecture. Haunting, magical, perfect locations for a book launch of The Quiet. Now, the title, The Quiet, is taken from the collection's main attraction, its long poem which is arranged throughout the book like the bread in a Big Mac. You see what I mean? Just flipping through the pages, you'll notice so much white space, so much quiet. What silence. Many poems are quite short, too, some only 4 or 5 lines. On top of this, every poem in the sequence, The Quiet, has a blank page to its left. This is such an effective way to magnify the importance of each poem in the sequence. I love the title, The Quiet. It's bold like a horror film. The Shining, The Conjuring, The Empty Man, The Witch. And like each of these horror films, which centers around the phenomenon in its title, Turza's poems seem to radiate outward from the same source, a strange darkness. Check out these first lines, for example, from a few of the more narrative poems. A man is sewing buttonholes into the wings of moths. The girl, when very young, was sealed in a glass case, lowered with ropes into the river. A year passed, and another year, and I was old. Love him. There's something secretive, elusive, and just so darn intriguing about these poems. Reading them is like walking through a dimly lit tunnel, catching glimpses of someone or something up ahead, whatever's at the root of the mystery. What is The Quiet? Well, so many things. In one poem, it's a room no one has entered in 27 years. In another, it's the private wiggle of some strange cellular creature under a microscope. It's one thing for me to summarize, and another to be immersed in Turza's language itself. 12-foot lobsters have eyes like deep, occupied manholes. The tardigrade, a microscopic animal, lumbers slowly in the ambit of a centimeter. What is The Quiet? It's a dark system's edge, a moth not drawn to the bulb, but to the darkness just beyond it. But The Quiet isn't just imagery, it's abstract leaps and movement. Consider the first 2 stanzas of Rock, Paper, Scissors' autobiography, which is a poetic imagining of all the combinations of that beloved playground pastime. Scissors, scissors. I too love molecules, to separate one from another, in fact, so they are rare and lonely. Rock blunts scissors, a rattling, crooked and purple, cartwheels upward, whistling with light. I am blind. I do not yet know it. Something else about this book. I like how many factoids are scattered throughout. So many times I ask myself, is that real? For example, in the first poem we read, as in the toothed whale, there is a buried hearing organ. Is there such a thing as a toothed whale? Does it literally have a buried hearing organ, or is the word buried a metaphor for the pressure against sound underwater? A quick Google search later, and it's all true. Toothed whales receive high-frequency sounds through specialized acoustic fats that lead to their internal ears. Pretty cool. Later in the collection we read, Baikal, a lake so deep a boulder dropped centermost would sink the length of the CN Tower once, twice, 3 times, and would still not reach its ground. Is Lake Baikal really that deep? Triple the CN Tower? Mind blown. Who made the snail curled in a perfect house, shitting on its own head? Hold up. Does a snail actually poop on its own head? They actually poop inside their shells. However, when it slowly slips out of the shell, it is closer to their face, making it seem like they are pooping from their head. Oh, nature, you never cease to amaze me. For some reason, for everything this collection does, I did not expect the play with punctuation and typeface. Admittedly, there are only a few examples, but this makes them seem more intentional and they stand out. Dashes are used in the first poem, like a dialogue. Questions are included without question marks. A double slash makes an appearance. There are even some variously sized O's. Now, just to change direction and dial up the drama, I want to talk about my least favorite poem. It's a prose poem called Last Hour, only 6 sentences long, and the first 2 really threw me off. He swam without air, elderly and east, in the warrens of his veins, his lungs 2-ton magnets in the pull of banished animals. Diplomistus brevissimus fish splay of Eocene bones prickling in his temporal lobe. First, I love these images. The warrens of his veins, his lungs 2-ton magnets, the pull of banished animals. But when they're squeezed all together into a single line without pause, it's definitely a challenge to sort out. The adverb elderly comes out of nowhere, and it took me a moment to realize I needed to read elderly and east as if between commas. He swam without air, elderly and east, in the warrens. Once I was done sorting that out and I was gasping for air, praying the next sentence took it easy on me, I was hit with Latin binomial nomenclature. Diplomistus brevissimus. Thankfully, I recently read Stephen Heighton's workbook, which includes some notes on how to be a good critic. Heighton writes, "Bad reviewers lash out at anything they can't understand or which threatens their vision." I will admit, those first 2 sentences from The Last Hour rubbed me the wrong way the first time I read them. But now, as I look back, I kind of like them, especially the first. The poem, after all, is about drowning, and that first sentence, its relentless push forward through adverb and preposition, is so unlike anything else in this collection. It suits its purpose, a marriage between form and content that sinks you in the rapids. It's a sentence that seems out of Turza's comfort zone, too, and I admire that. Now that I think about it, it's hard to define the boundaries of Turza's comfort zone. Just a glance through the notes at the back of this collection reveals the sheer variety of sources of inspiration. A field guide to insects and spiders, Eric Satie's letters, a fisherman's song, a sulfur cave in Mexico, the work of philosopher Simone Weil, essayist Michel de Montaigne. Turza doesn't hold back from incorporating as many influences as seem congruent with her own poetic vision. She even risks including a poem that harkens back to high school math. The opening 2 words, "how many," combined with the last line, "x is greater than," reminds me of my high school teacher, Mr. Konstantinidis, presenting a math problem and asking me to solve for x. There's still so much I could praise about this book. The exquisite prose poems inspired by Anna Karenina, which is one of Turza's favorites. The captivating titles of so many of these poems. And the collection's balance between challenge and accessibility, something that makes this book an excellent gift for poetry-curious friends. If you haven't read The Quiet, you're late to the party, like me. Buy a copy from Anansi Press. Even better, buy the hardcover special edition, which costs as much as the regular paperback. This is one of those rare collections that sits on your bookshelf forever, or until you give it to someone you love. Don't forget, this is all just one person's opinion on Anne-Marie Tursis the Quiet. I hope you enjoyed my take, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Bye-bye for now.